So I would love for this to be an interactive conversation. We've all just shared this beautiful movie together, and let's share the conversation. So if you'd like to put up your hands, I'll call on you to ask some questions. But I think I wanted to start off with just a couple of questions of my own. First of all, Katie, this film flows so effortlessly and beautifully, but I imagine it didn't start off that way. How did you decide on your approach, or how did you find your approach to telling Jonas's story?
Oh, so I mean, the beautiful thing about documentary is that it evolves, right? But with this film, I honestly feel like Jonas sort of made it. He felt he was a little bit of the puppet master along the way. I mean, we began the process by first getting all of the stuff into a system, which was quite effortful. And then we spent about a year watching the entire archive. I think I may be one of 5 people who've...
I think you're probably the only person who's watched as much as you have. I almost could guarantee it.
It was a lot.
It's amazing what she's done.
So I started with an idea. I mean, if you know Jonas, you sort of know the story of Jonas. You have this idea of what it's going to be. But then when you sit and watch his work, I mean, it's almost, I think that's how he intended his work to be seen. So the archive exists. It's at Manna Contemporary in Jersey City. I encourage you to go do it. It will speak to you and probably say different things. But over time, a new story began to unfold.
Okay, all right. That's a magical, beautiful process. How long in time was that from when you started to?
We started the process of gathering everything in 2019.
Okay.
But it was the pandemic years, 2020, that I was watching. I think it took about 8 months total, and my days were like 12, 15, 16-hour days of just meditatively beginning to watch, the footage, and themes began to, appear over time.
Gotcha. And Hollis and Oona, what would Jonas say if he was here watching this with us? What would he have said after? What do you think he would have said?
I think he would love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think he would love it. I think that he wouldn't have been boisterous about it either, but he would have given you a good slap on the back and said, good job. Good work.
I met Jonas when I was in college. My friend Greg Zucker, who's in the film very briefly, took me to anthology. I had just decided I wanted to be a filmmaker and had no idea how to do it. And he introduced me to Jonas, and I asked him what to should I go to film school? Should I change my major? And he was like, no, don't go to film school. Just make films.
That's what he told me, too.
Yeah, he told
really
everybody. I then found out I am not special. He told everybody that. But, that's then what I tried to do. And I only met him a couple times, but I didn't know him, which I think was kind of a special way, because I began to meet him in his footage, and interviewing people over time. Everybody had their own specific Jonas, but Jonas with the camera was this really intimate Jonas. He was with the camera the way that he was with no one else. You know what I mean? It's like that sort of that intimacy that happens, behind closed doors, So it was this really intimate experience. I mean, I knew the chronology, and I had this sense, from what I had seen, that he was very poetic and that we were going to end up somewhere inspiring, that he was trying to do something with his camera. But what I found, what really spoke to me, particularly during the pandemic, was somebody who was reconciling pain and loss with their art, and I think what more could we do as artists, than to use our art as a tool to figure it all out, So as I began to see how he was doing that, I knew that I wanted to get us to that place where the audience was discovering that for themselves. So, the footage is how all those little bits and fragments, that's how the story began to come together. And I have an incredible editor, Michael Levine, who I hope is in the crowd here somewhere. He is just phenomenal. And so, he also had a big hand in the telling of the story as well. Yeah, Jonas, with the Bolex footage, I mean, he would also often use recorded sound, and I think he was recording it. I mean, you guys can speak to it better. Like sometimes, what was he using? He was recording wild sounds separately when there wasn't sync sound.
Like he had a reel-to-reel tape recorder, and which he used like earlier on, and then he would put. I don't know. I think he was really a genius at matching the music to his films.
Music was such a part of it.
And then his videos, I mean, that was all simultaneous, and they're amazing. But he was very, very, very sensitive to sound and music and blending it. And I think KD's film blends it, and you blend it in a really beautiful way.
I just want to acknowledge Katie for being the first person to ever interview my mother. And the fact that it took that many fucking decades to do it is a victory in this world of cinema. So I want to just acknowledge you for that.
These ladies are the best. This family is the best. I mean, come on, you know, like. Thank you. But I mean, there was a lot of non-matched wild sound that he would use, like tape recording, the clicking of the single frame on the Bolex, like all kinds of stuff like that. So that we used some of that. But then obviously, when he transferred to using like, you know, stuff that had natural sound, then we could use that as well.
But I really think it's genius the way you blended the footage with the interviews. I mean, you matched it. I mean, you worked so hard and you spent hours, and you created this portrait it's really different than his films, but it's totally him.
And actually, that's something that somebody who's close to the family told me when she saw it. She said, "This feels like one of Jonas's films," and it does.
I need to bring you guys around with me and just like, we're a big fan. It's a great confidence boost.
Anyone else have a question? Over there. Mm-hmm.
I kind of remember seeing a lot of other people's films, but not his stuff, unless it was hanging out with him in the editing room and looking over his shoulder. But I think for me, it was a very kind of, it was just his deal. I don't know. Maybe when I was younger, what do you think?
Can you just repeat the question?
She wanted to know, like, if he ever, I think what you're asking is if he ever shared, like, things that he was working on before he was finished with them with us. Is that kind of?
Oh, he would show them to us on his movieola.
But it was just kind of a work in progress. It wasn't like, okay, so tonight at 8 p.m. I have this thing I need to show you, and you need to tell me what you think. Like, I don't think he ever really cared what we thought.
I mean, it was
his thing.
Just very, I mean, it's very organic. Like, he was a very organic person.
But, I mean, he did work from home, so we were always there. I mean, I played violin when I was a child, and I practiced for at least an hour a day. And I would stand there. This is not maybe about his films, but about his writing. He would be sitting at the typewriter, and I would be watching him type and practicing right over his head. I don't even know how he would tolerate that, because I have an 8-year-old, and I would never tolerate that. But he tolerated it for years, stuff like that. But it was great, because I could just literally watch him write. It was, I don't know, I thought about that the other day. Like, why didn't he just tell me to stop?
And like when he was working, he would always have music going, the TV going. He really liked to be surrounded by media. So I think that's part of it. You were an additional entertainment.
I think that's like an ADD thing, right? Like people need stuff, sound. ADHD, something.
So, Katie, did you work that way too? Did you work in the same way as Jonas?
No, that is not the way that I work. But I witnessed that that's how it happened in their house, and you'd be like, "Why are they playing violin in the background?" I just
did you
love
see
this
what?
sound.
Really? Okay. It wasn't a story.
Right here. Go ahead.
His idea for 365 films was that, and I remember him talking about it. He said that the iPod was out. I don't think iPhones were existing, but there were these, little square iPods that I had one. And he was like, I want people are going to watch this 365 on the iPod and they can, and I was like, that is the dumbest idea. Nobody's going to do that. I was like, he was really ahead of it. I think he would have loved TikTok. He probably would have thought most of it was just total garbage, but there's some gems there, and he would probably have liked some of the cat videos. And
Definitely the cat videos. Good question.
I doubt anybody ever talked to you about it, because considering you're the first person to ever interviewed her, basically, it's like, I don't know why that happened. But after he died, there was, I think you were the first person who approached us, and my brother and I were kind of working together to take care of all the stuff after he died. And then after we decided we just thought you had a great idea. And then there was one other person, I don't even know if we're allowed to say it, so I'm not going to say who it was. It wasn't like some crazy famous person, but I just don't know what the legality is. But they wanted to make a film, and we just said, well, too bad. And then it never went anywhere anyway, and I don't know if they were serious, and I don't think it would have been as good, so it doesn't matter. But there weren't like 50 people, and it was just kismet, I think.
Did you have any connections with the? Was it kind of just out of the blue that you kind of approached Oona and Hollis?
I think that this is it's very much like a Jonas thing. It's just, how does anything ever happen? Like, it only makes sense when you're looking back on it.
Mm-hmm.
But at the time, my friend, Greg, the one who was in there briefly and who had introduced me to him, I had come back to New York to make another film right as Jonas got sick. And I was living in Greg's building. And he was like, dude, you should really make a film about Jonas. And I was like, I'm not the one. I don't do avant-garde film. Like, somebody else should do it. And he was like, no, really, it would be really great. And we just started talking about it. And I met with Sebastian and Oona, and we all just kind of hit it off. And it just, I don't know, it happened. I don't know, it just kind of.
Yeah, I couldn't remember exactly. But that first meeting, yeah, it was really obvious that it was just a good fit. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah.
Because I have an independent relationship with Lithuanian media because of my own career. Sometimes I get asked these kind of questions about my father and his relationship to Lithuania, and it's really, really complicated. So he was in exile for all those years, and he wasn't really welcomed. He didn't feel welcomed when it opened up as much. And it was decades later. So I think it took him a while for him to warm up to the community there. And the Lithuanian American community was also kind of not his thing for various reasons. And so I don't think he felt welcome in either of those communities for decades. And so then when Lithuania finally became free of the Soviet Union, there wasn't really a relationship there, so it had to be started from scratch. And so he did go back later in life a few times, and it was always like a very kind of tenuous relationship. And the filmmakers there were so much younger. I mean, he was 90, he was in his 80s and 90s, and everybody else was in their 40s. They didn't remember the occupation in the same way. But he had this real connection to the country and maybe not the film community there. And I also feel like Lithuanians mostly know him for his poetry. I mean, he was a filmmaker, but maybe I think a poet first there. So I don't know. I don't know if that helps answer that. But.
There were like so many of us out there that just started doing that because Jonas told us to. So,
Thanks, Jonas.
you asked, was there any footage? I was unsure if I should use. Yeah, I mean the footage that begins the film and that the emotional kind of crescendo. That was something that took a lot of thought, when we decided to use it. I honestly, I was mostly worried about how Hollis and Oona and Sebastian would react to seeing that footage. It wasn't something that had been, that he had put out. But when we came across it, it was such an impactful thing to witness, and for me, it was like the perfect representation of the dark night of the soul that I myself have experienced, and so many people have experienced. And I saw it as this just incredibly brave thing. And I thought, if, like he says, I don't know why I'm filming it, but I'm filming it, and to me, that felt like, the license to then use it if it could help somebody, if it could make somebody else feel not alone in that moment, or feel like with the ladybug, that's just, we're going round and round, you know what I mean? Like, I think in order to understand like the joy and the beautiful place that Jonas ended up, you have to understand the pain, and like, when do you have that kind of pain so honest, like on camera? So, but yeah, that was something that we really debated a lot about.
I think that the repetition of it is also really like to give us a glimpse in the beginning and then see how you get to the end. I think that was a really nice way to place it, and it's really powerful. And I think it's probably hard for lots of people to see, even if he's not your father or your ex-husband. I mean, it's really raw and it's really dark, but it's important to show it's important to show the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I agree. And I think it's also, it's like his story. And then Katie takes it to this crescendo of all the things he did. All the acclamation he received later in life, which, how many people get that? Like he really did bloom. And then I like the repetition. I think it really works. And it's very powerful. So thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I had never seen that before, so but to see it again, it works.
Thank you. Thank you so much for coming to share this film. Thank you, Katie. Thank you, Hollis and Oona.
Thank you.
It's a great pleasure to have you with us.
Thanks, guys. Thanks very much for coming.